What's up guys, David here from PhoneBuff, and year after year, myself and many others in the tech community look forward to the next version of Samsung's Galaxy Note, probably more so than any other Android smartphone out there. And it isn't because of the design or the build quality of the Note. It isn't because of the software, and it certainly isn't because of the price, but instead, it's the cutting edge specs that Samsung delivers with each new iteration of the Note that gets us all excited. Now, when you look at the spec sheet on the Note 3, you'll see that even months after it's been released, it's still one of the highest end Android smartphones out there. With a 5.7-inch Super AMOLED HD screen, 2.3 GHz Snapdragon 800 processor, not 2 but 3 GB of RAM, a 13 megapixel camera capable of 4K video recording, USB 3.0, and not to mention a huge 3200 mAh battery, there's really not much to dislike about the Note 3, at least from a hardware perspective. But that's the thing about it, there's so much more that goes into the ultimate experience that you get from a phone than just hardware, and in some of those areas, depending on what you're looking for in a phone, the Note 3 could have some serious drawbacks. For one, the Note 3, just like all of the predecessors before it, is a big phone, and for some people, it can be too big to the point that it isn't easy for them to use with one hand, or even worse, it doesn't even fit in their pockets. Another potential drawback, again depending on what you're looking for in a phone, is the plasticky build of the Note 3 that Samsung phones are pretty much known for nowadays. And then finally, the last thing I could think of that is a potential drawback that really was the first thing that came to mind is the software that Samsung loads onto their phones in TouchWiz. Now, for those of you who watched the Living with the Note 2 video that I did last year, you might recall that the drawbacks that I talked about in that video in regards to the Note 2 are the very same drawbacks that I just mentioned with the Note 3, which, while disappointing, isn't really all that surprising because these drawbacks kind of come with the territory. I mean, the Note 3 wouldn't really be a Galaxy Note without its large display, which can obviously cause the phone to be too big for some people. It wouldn't have that removable back cover, which gives you the removable battery and the expandable microSD card slot without the plasticky build quality. And then for better or for worse, it wouldn't quite be a Samsung made flagship without TouchWiz running the show. But the good news is the Note 3 isn't just a Note 2 with better specs, and while the two phones do share some of the same drawbacks, Samsung did a relatively good job at minimizing these drawbacks on the Note 3. So the first hint of this can be seen in the build quality and design. Now, the Note 3 is still very much a plastic phone, but Samsung has done a few things to make it feel or at least look a little bit more premium. On the back, you have a soft touch leatherette material that, while still plastic, adds a sense of luxury to the phone that I actually really like. Wrapping around the phone is a metallic looking band whose ridges resemble the pages of a notepad, so kudos to Samsung for sticking with the notepad theme, but just like the back cover, this metal looking band is still made of plastic, evidenced by the slight dent that I have in my unit from a 2-foot drop. And then finally on the front, the bezels, at least on this black version, have a brushed aluminum look that, combined with the back cover and the side band, gives the Note 3 an overall good look. Not necessarily great, but definitely a step up from the more plasticky feeling Note 2 and even the more recent Galaxy S4. But the build quality and design isn't anywhere near as big of a deal breaker for the Note series as is the sheer size of these phones, so it was important that with the Note 3, Samsung tried their best to minimize this drawback. Now, until Samsung figures out a way to make a flexible phone that can just be folded up and put in your pocket, the Note's large physical size is here to stay for the foreseeable future. Again, this may or may not be an issue depending on who you are, but for my girlfriend, for example, the Note 3's size is just too big. I mean, she absolutely loves the phone, but it doesn't fit in most of her pant pockets, and I don't think she'd be willing to change her whole wardrobe just to accommodate for a phone. I, on the other hand, standing just over 6 feet tall, don't have too many issues with the size of the phone other than the fact that it doesn't fit in my car's cup holder where I typically like to leave my phone when I'm driving. So the physical size of the phone can still be a problem, but with some touch optimized wizardry from Samsung, the virtual size of the phone doesn't really have to be. Thanks to the high-end specs that we were talking about earlier, with its powerful CPU and GPU, the Note 3 screen can be rescaled on the fly to anywhere between 3.5 and 4.5 inches diagonally, making the phone a lot easier to use with one hand. And while I don't use this feature as much as someone with smaller hands probably would, in those times that I only have one hand available, like when I'm holding groceries or if I'm walking my dog, having the ability to resize the screen with a simple swipe in and out from the edge of the phone is a really nice thing to have, and I think it definitely minimizes the issue of poor one-handed use. Now, this screen rescaling feature is a software feature that is built straight into TouchWiz, and as many of you guys know, I tend to prefer the stock Android experience over just about any other third-party UI, including TouchWiz, but yet, when it comes to TouchWiz on the Galaxy Note 3, I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship going on. For example, if I was to choose between the TouchWiz edition of the Galaxy S4 versus the Play edition of the Galaxy S4, I'd go with the Play edition 9, maybe 10 times out of 10. But with the Galaxy Note 3, if there were a Play edition of the Note, I'd go with it only 5 or 6 times out of 10. And that's because while TouchWiz can still be irritating, bogging down a phone that should have no performance issues whatsoever given the hardware, it does add some value like screen rescaling that can make the overall experience of the Note better with TouchWiz than with stock Android alone. But screen rescaling by itself wouldn't be enough. It's also the software suite that comes with one of the biggest features of the Galaxy Note that I'm surprised I haven't talked about yet, being several minutes into this video, in the S Pen. As soon as you pull the S Pen out of the Note, you get a little pop-up window in Air Command, giving you quick and easy access to some of the S Pen's most useful TouchWiz features. You also have things like S Pen Keeper, which prevents you from walking off without reattaching the S Pen, and then finally, you have S Note, which in my opinion is the best note-taking app available on any mobile OS. Those features, in combination with some of the others that are actually useful in TouchWiz, make having TouchWiz on the Note 3 not as much of a drawback as it initially seems. Of course, like I said earlier, TouchWiz does seem to bog down the Note 3 a bit, with my unit freezing and lagging from time to time, which is just inexcusable given the hardware, but hopefully Samsung could address this issue with a software update in the future. So I've spent the majority of this video talking about the drawbacks on the Note 3 and how Samsung has minimized them in comparison to the Note 2, and I've done this because outside of these 3 major drawbacks, the Note 3 is kind of the complete package. You've got probably the best display on any smartphone right now, a powerful quad-core processor with a bunch of RAM, a crisp and clear camera that's capable of recording amazing 4K video, a battery that lasts even the heaviest of users all day long, and extra features that you don't really see on other phones like USB 3.0, a removable battery and microSD card slot, an IR blaster, and of course the S Pen. So like I said in the beginning, if the drawbacks that I mentioned earlier aren't a deal breaker for you, then there really isn't a whole lot to dislike about the Note 3. Of course, the new HTC One and Galaxy S5 are just around the corner, so it would be wise to wait and see what those are all about before pulling the trigger on the Note 3, and you can bet that there'll be some PhoneBuff style comparisons coming up between these phones to help you make that final decision. But on that note, that's pretty much it for me in this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps me and the channel out a bunch, and if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button down there to be among the first to get more mobile technology videos from me, just like this. Thank you for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys in the very next video.